I want to begin, Wendy, by thanking you, as I always do appropriately, thanking you for putting this series together and all the work that went into it. And there's a lot of work. I think people see the end result. It's like when a chef creates a meal, they don't realize all that went into it, all the love and hard work and telephone calls and emails and organization that you've done to make this series as successful as it has been. It's been fantastic and a real credit to you. So thank you. And I also want to thank those of you who have sponsored our series for helping us with obviously the funds necessary to make this available to the community. I think a lot of people have learned a lot, myself included, through listening to my colleagues and learning from them. So I want to say just a brief personal welcome to Rabbi Alicia Magal, and I'll say that it's really lovely to see you. I've been to your gorgeous synagogue. I don't know a synagogue like it. I've been in many beautiful synagogues in the world, whether it's some great architectural masterpiece in a great city, or an ancient synagogue on top of Masada, or somewhere else in Israel. But to be in Sedona and looking to the left and right of your own HaKodesh, the Ark in your synagogue is, look at these pictures. It's really extraordinary, sacred ground there. And I want to say also that you and I have a very long history. I don't know that when we knew each other, let me make the assumption that when we first met when I was a child, I don't think either of us would have imagined that we'd be having this kind of conversation as rabbis. So who knew that that would happen in our lives? So I'm really grateful to you and happy that you're joining with us and that Yitzhak, your husband, is watching as well. All right, so let me invite Wendy to more formally introduce you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Li-Paz.
Of course.
And welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here tonight with us. I would like to introduce you to Rabbi Alicia Magal. Currently, she serves as the spiritual leader of the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley in northern Arizona. She's a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College, majoring in French and art history with a master's in teaching from Wesleyan University. She spent 7 years in Israel, working at the Israel Broadcasting Authority national television station and as a licensed tour guide for adult and youth groups. Rabbi Magal developed interactive programs and museum tours as museum educator at the Skirball Museum in Los Angeles. She worked as program director for Temple Emmanuel in Beverly Hills and served as rabbinic intern for Kehilat Israel in Pacific Palisades. She received rabbinical ordination in 2003 from the Aleph Jewish Renewal Rabbinical Program and from the Academy for Jewish Religion in Los Angeles. Rabbi Magal served as spiritual leader for Makom Shalom, a Jewish renewal congregation in Chicago, before moving to Sedona in 2006. She is the author of the book From Miracle to Miracle, a story of survival, a biography of her mother, the story of a young Jewish woman's survival during the Holocaust, and the impact of her dramatic story on her daughters growing up. We are so privileged and so honored to have her with us tonight, and we welcome you, Rabbi Magal.
Thank you so much, Wendy. There's one thing you left out of my bio that perhaps is more important tonight, and that is that I met your mother when I taught her in the docent group at the Skirball Museum back in the 1980s. Yes. And that is one of our connections. Yeah, so that's very important to know. And I see that Ellie is on tonight. Hello, Ellie. Well, shalom, everybody. I'm feeling your presence, even though I can't see your faces. And I hope that this will be an intriguing presentation that will remind you of things that you kind of already knew, but you never put them into place. So let's talk about miracles, magic, and Mazel. You know, there are things in our lives that are unknown. And it is a human natural impulse to want to control what cannot be controlled. We also want to feel in a sense of wonder and awe. And the Bible, Torah, and then the later Talmud and all of our writings and all of our wanderings have led us to have both rules, what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do. And then there's custom, and there's baba mices. There's stuff your grandmother did. There are things that people in the community did that were not according to the rules, but they made us feel better. So let us look at some of these miracles and ask ourselves, what's the difference between miracles and magic? And then look at how we try to control our destiny, our health, our wish for children, for healing, for a good outcome, for a safe journey. How do we go about that as Jews? And how did we do it in North Africa, in Israel, in the Galilee, in America, in Europe? Because, you know, we always took from the surrounding cultures and then adapted it to Jewish boundaries and traditions. So I'm going to share the screen. And since I have a background in art history, I'm going to use a lot of illustrations because speech is one thing, but seeing is also so helpful. So we want to know, what does the Torah say about magic? Well, in Genesis, you remember the story of Rachel when Jacob took his whole family and they snuck out of Laban's house, his father-in-law's house. And Rachel was sitting on a camel. And when her father came and said, who stole the teraphim, the household gods? She said, well, it is with me in the manner of a woman, and I cannot get off my saddle. She had hidden them in her saddlebag. These are examples of teraphim, they're household gods. And it's so interesting because he said, why did you steal my Elohim, my gods, my spirits? So there clearly was a sense that even though she was leaving and they were starting a whole, you know, they were part of Abraham's family and they believed in Elohim, in one God, she wanted something from home, something that was comforting. And some people say, well, no, she took it away so her father shouldn't worship idols anymore. So the rabbis try to explain, was it for herself or was it to prevent idol worship on the part of her father? So we don't know. But the truth is, in the Torah, it says, you have one God and you should not turn to idols. And this is an example of the pool of little tiny few inch high idols from home. So we look at miracles versus magic. Now we all know the story in Exodus where Moses confronts the wizards of Pharaoh. He puts down his staff, it turns to a snake, and then back into a staff. Well, Pharaoh's magicians can match that, and they do that with their staff too. But once Moses starts to escalate the miracles and the difficulty and the severity, they can't match it. They can't manage the plagues once there's Dam Tzfardea Kinim, you know, all the plagues that we talk about at Passover. No, they weren't able to. And it wasn't called magic. It was called God helping Moses to make a miracle. So it seems to me that when Moses and Aaron spread their rods and split the sea and all of the miracles we read, that's called a miracle from God. But if magicians do it, that's called magic. Depends on who is the author. So that's quite interesting because it clearly was a magic trick and some of the wizards in Egypt could match it, but only to a point. There is another example of magical signs and symbols for decision making. I don't know, when you were a kid, did you ever use a Ouija board, or did you ever throw runes, or did you ever use the I Ching? It's that kind of a idea of the lights or the stones in the pouch of the high priest would either light up or be thrown a certain way. There was a pouch, so we don't know if it's what's inside the pouch or it was the stones themselves that represented the 12 tribes that were used by the high priest, but it couldn't be for simple, little, insignificant decisions. It was only decisions of national importance, and we read about that in the Torahs, and it's a mystery. Urim v'tumim. Urim is probably lights, like or, and tumim could be something about simplicity. I'm not really sure what it means, but this was the choshen, the shield, the breastplate of the high priest, and something in it was used to figure out, do we go to war? Do we go left? Do we go right? What do we do? And that's pretty mystical, pretty magical. So we want to know, what does the Torah actually say about, what does it say about magic and sorcery? So I really had to bring you this few verses from Deuteronomy. There shall not be found among you anyone that consigns his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, one that uses divination, a soothsayer, an enchanter, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or one that consults a ghost or a familiar spirit, that's usually through cats, or inquires of the dead. So this was quite clear. But what happens? Even though this is considered an abomination, well, people did interpret dreams. They used magic staffs. They recited blessings and curses. And King Saul actually had said, okay, no sorcerers, no enchanters. But when it came down to it, and he was terrified by the Philistines, and he couldn't get answers by himself, he tried dreams, he asked his prophets. He had made his own decree to banish all the witches and the magic workers from the land. He himself, the king, went to a medium and said, and he went disguised and he said, please bring up the spirit of Samuel. I have to know what's going to happen. And she was frightened. She said, are you trying to entrap me so that you can kill me or banish me? He said, no, no, I really, really need to know. And what happened? The witch of Endor is how she's called, but she was probably a medium. She summoned Samuel. And the prophet Samuel spoke to him and said, why have you bothered me? Why did you bring me up? And they have this whole discussion. You can see Saul is just on the floor, just distraught. So even the one who said there should be no sorcerers, he himself went to like a kind of a seance to get advice from beyond. So what do we really believe about good luck? Well, there are many talismans, segulot, and amulets. And a segula could be a phrase, or it could be a kamea, it could be something physical that you hold in your hand. And one of the shapes that many of you have seen, I'm even wearing a necklace today that has a hamsa on it, is in this form of a hand of blessing that comes from North Africa and was then taken over by Jews as a Jewish good luck charm. So these amulets often could be worn as jewelry, and they would possess magical powers of protection. This is one I made out of copper. It's another workshop I did. I like hands-on projects, and this says ahava, and you could put shalom or an eye for good luck. You could put anything in the middle. This was a workshop I did with our women's group. Now, Jewish tradition, you have to understand, is generally seen as opposed to magic and to sorcery, and as well as objects that people may come to believe possess power. But, however, amulets do have a long history in Jewish practice, and their use came to be accepted even by the ancient rabbis who even believed in their power. So you see the symbol is an open hand usually symmetrical on both sides, often with an eye in the center of the palm, sometimes adorned with a fish, because the fish don't blink. Their eyes are always open. And these are symbols of protection and luck. Now, the hand can either be pointing down or up. I've shown you 2 examples here. And the fingers are spread, or sometimes a little more close together. And the whole point was to wear something that would give you protection. Another example is a phrase. Now, Hebrew is considered a holy language, and the Ana B'Choach is a prayer that's also considered kind of mystical and protective. And it contains a 42-letter name of God. You know, there are many names of God, and it's spread out in a certain way. This one is actually with a red string, so that's double protection. The people would chant a Hebrew phrase or wear something that they felt would protect them from the dangers of travel, from the dangers of illness, from the evil eye. And we're going to look more on that. What is that evil eye? Where does that come into our tradition? Words that were magical were sometimes used. You've heard of abracadabra? Well, that comes from the Aramaic and the Hebrew. I will create as I speak. Adaber and bore, you know, these 2 roots. So abracadabra is the Aramaic form of creating through speech. And magicians the world over have used that word. It's not a nonsense word. It really comes from our tradition. Now, ayin hara, you may have heard of as kaina hara, but it really means keneged ayin hara, as against the evil eye. And this is Lilith, who is supposed to be Adam's first wife, and who wanted to be equal. And Adam wouldn't have it, and she flew away and became like the night demon tempting men. And here in this, actually this is on the Notre Dame Cathedral. It's a bas-relief of Adam and Eve. You see Adam and a kind of very young looking Eve, but look at the snake. The snake actually turns into this buxom temptress, and she's connected with a kind of evil intent to woo men away from the straight and narrow. And so to prevent any intrusion by Eve, people would put a red string, a red wool kind of a tie or a ribbon around a crib. I could not find a picture of a crib with a red tie, so I sort of imposed it here. But you may have seen a red ribbon or something red in a baby's crib, and you didn't know why. This is the reason. Now, Lilith also sounds a little like Lila, like night. So she's considered the demon temptress, who was first mentioned in ancient Babylonian texts as a kind of winged demon that attacks pregnant women and infants. So the red string is protection for babies, for men, and I guess potentially for any young boy who could be tempted. So maybe you have a bracelet that has an amulet on it. There are so many forms of this. Mostly they're red, but sometimes they're blue, because that's also a color of the sky. And you have the eye, which is open in protection. And it's knotted a certain way. This one is adjustable, or they can have clasps. I know we have several in our gift store, and anytime a visitor comes, they definitely want a red protective bracelet from Sedona. It somehow has double protection. So why red string? It would be worn around the wrist, and it also has become kind of popular, you know, with celebrities in our country, but this is a very old tradition. And all of them are to ward off the evil eye, ayin hara. It's a Jewish folk superstition, and it claims that a person or a supernatural being can harm a person by looking at them. And you don't want to draw negative energy. Like you would never say, oh, what a beautiful baby. And somebody would say, tu, 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 right? They would say, don't, they want to get rid of that, lo limshoch ayin harad, not to draw down the evil eye. I have a, I don't know if you can see this, but I have a Hamsa that says tfu, tfu, tfu on it in Hebrew, which I thought was very funny. And I put that up on my wall along with all my other good luck charms and home blessing. I have many blessings for the house. So Hebrew as a holy language offers many powerful phrases. The one you all know is Shema Yisrael, and that is considered a phrase that elevates and protects, and it's in our Mezuzahs, right? And also it is combined with other words in Hebrew as a good luck charm, or as a something on the wall that brings you back to being centered. This is an example of a shiviti, which means I place God before me always. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, and it's decorated with all kinds of phrases, hallelujah, and there's a Hamsa down here in micrography. This is tiny writing, so you have prayers that are in the shape of a menorah, in the shape of hands, in the shape of the sun and the moon, in the shape of gates opening, all of it to guide us into meditation that in itself is centering, powerful, protective, and pointing towards something that is godly. This shiviti would be placed traditionally on the eastern wall in a home or in a synagogue. So depending on the architecture, you wouldn't always have the ark facing east. It depended on how the building was built. So you would place this shiviti on the eastern wall so that when you get up for the Amidah, when you get up for Aleinu, when you get up for some of those prayers where you have to face east, you would look at the shiviti on the wall. So I cannot stress enough how powerful the names of God, the Hebrew letters themselves are. There's special power in the words and phrases that God speaks. In other words, the words of the Torah and the Hebrew Bible. And even the Hebrew alphabet itself is considered kind of supernatural. It's the building blocks of creation. They're not just they're not just sounds. They actually have weight. Aleph is 1, Beit is 2, and many of you know about gematria, that you have certain combinations that have meaning, and therefore one word will equal another, even though none of the letters are the same, but the weight is the same, the numbers, the numerology is the same. Perhaps you have a Chai necklace, which is 18. So you know about numbers, 4, 7, 10, 40. For each of these numbers, I bet you could give me several examples of why they're mystical, why they're important, why they're repeated. Anyone who's ever been to a Seder knows about the 4s. You remember how 40 years we wandered in the desert, 40 days, 40 weeks gestation of a baby. Every number has weight and importance. And so those words, Shema and Be'ahavta, you shall love God with all your heart and soul and might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be upon your heart, and you'll put them in the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So a mezuzah with the shin here for Shaddai, for the protective aspect of God, is placed on doors. In gift shops, there are so many covers, so many ways they can be decorated. Wood and ceramic and glass and so many ways, but the cloth, the parchment inside always has the same prayer. And it's considered such good luck that I even know non-Jews who put them up on their door or who buy them as jewelry. Here's a mezuzah that is clearly a necklace, and it's considered a good luck charm. So here is a mitzvah. You shall put this on the doorpost of your house. And yet the mitzvah got turned into also a good luck charm. How many of you walk into your home and you touch the mezuzah and kiss it on the way in and on the way out? That's not part of the mitzvah, but it certainly makes you feel connected to those protective and holy words. Now, here's something that people don't know a whole lot about. These are called incantation bowls. The Talmud shows that Jews in late antiquity accepted and participated in the culture of magic and miracles of their age. The use of magical powers, that was seen as normal. I mean, we didn't have all that much science, and so magic had a really important place. The use of magical powers was seen as normal, and it was sanctioned as long as the person involved stood within the rabbinic community and used magic, not for evil purposes, but for purposes accepted within rabbinic religion. What's that? For healing, for good luck, for children. And archaeological evidence reveals the extent to which the Jews of the Talmudic period, very much like their non-Jewish neighbors, accepted and depended upon the magical spells for protection against demons and any kind of ills. And this is written in Hebrew, an older form of Hebrew, and they call them magic bowls or incantation bowls. These were pottery, and they were written with a magical formula, and they were supposed to drive away evil spirits. This one here even has like a flaming torch, stay away. And sometimes the recipient was at the bottom of the bowl saying, I want to get pregnant. Or sometimes it was calling in the directions of the compass. And very often these would be formulas that would say, I banish you, demon, known by this name and all other names. And it was written in the form very much like a get, which is a divorce decree. And very often the scribes who would write these divorce decrees would also be the ones writing the bowls. So sort of like a sideline for good luck. The evil spirits, they would want to drive them away and invoke a deity's help in preserving and protecting individuals or a family. This is during the Talmudic period from about, I would say, 300 to 600 CE, and it comes from a Babylonian custom that was taken over. Sometimes they were buried near the home. Sometimes they were just placed under a cloth in the home, but they were thought to have enormous power. And I just find this fascinating. We actually created some of these in our synagogue once, and it was a very powerful thing. People asked for children for their grandchildren. They wanted fertility in their family. They wanted to get rid of illness, and they went at it with such concentration. I found it just fascinating. I must admit, I made one myself. Now, if you ask about horoscopes and the zodiac, we have a history with that too. However, at the same time as synagogues, like in the Galilee, would have the zodiac sign, you can see the 12 zodiac signs, and they would say every month has an energy. As a matter of fact, they would even show that the name of God, the unpronounceable four-letter name of God, the Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, had a different permutation for each of the months. Like the month of Purim, Adar, is completely backwards. And some of them have more of a feminine aspect with the Heys in the beginning and then the Yud and the Vav. I mean, there's all kinds of understanding that there is an energy. There is an energy to the holiday and the season of the month. So even though you can see here these sort of childish looking mosaics, the reason is that in this particular synagogue, they couldn't afford the one that had been trained in Rome, next door that was so beautiful, and they give the assistant. So all of his stuff looked like cats, and, you know, they look funny, but still they do represent the zodiac. What was taught was a person should not try to search out the future and look into horoscopes, because God can change a destiny from good to bad and vice versa. And yet the medium of astrology and the symbols of the zodiac did portray for the common Jew of the Talmudic period the cosmic order and the deity who had created that order. You know how we say in the evening prayer, and arranges the stars in their heavens according to plan? It's in the evenings, in the Ma'ariv Aravim prayer. So if God created the stars and the constellations, why shouldn't we portray them? Although they did go a little far. Here is the god Helios, the sun god with the chariot and the horses on the chariot. So that's going a little far. But still, people understood when they went to the synagogue, there was a true God who responds to human prayer, who controls and shapes in the manner that astrology describes all that happens on earth. So I'm sure that you have, as I'm talking, thought about some examples. Like, I know my mother would never have said, oh, it's a beautiful baby, or, oh, we made so much money this year. It would always, you know, we're comfortable. Oh, kind of her, nice kid. You know, you would never exaggerate something good because you're going to draw down negative energy or jealousy or envy. Maybe you touch the mezuzah when entering or leaving a house, or you say 222 over fingers. I think that's kind of gone the way of the last generation, but perhaps you've seen it. Maybe you have a high necklace, or you've given donations in multiples of 18, because the Chet is 8 and Yud is 10. So it spells out chai and it means life. So why not give a donation in something that enhances life? Beautiful idea. Perhaps you've heard that Tuesday is Pamaim Ki Tov. It was blessed twice. And so a wedding on a Tuesday or doing something on a Tuesday is considered really good luck. And maybe you have others that you'd like to share. So I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me and I can be hearing the questions that have come up. And I just touched on briefly some of these aspects so that we can separate, what does the Torah teach about sorcery, magic, horoscopes, and what did we hold on to? Kind of like, it's a little superstition, but it can't hurt, you know, it's good luck. It's for a good purpose. I'd love to hear some of your reactions. Maybe some of this surprised you. Maybe this is something that you've lived with your whole life. So I'm going to ask Ron, did you have any questions or answers that have come up that we can discuss?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for a really interesting presentation. I also want to say to everybody that you can use the Q&A at the bottom of Zoom to ask any questions, and then I will share them with Rabbi Magal. I want to ask you, you know, one of the things that you said was, for instance, foot over the fingers. I know foot over the shoulder. We all have different ways of doing these things. Oh, that's it. Oh yeah, foot.
Isn't that funny?
It is. What do you think is happening in our culture that these are being lost? Do you think it's a good thing that we let go of superstition? Do you think it's better for Judaism and Jews? Because I would say that our kids probably aren't familiar, that generation isn't familiar with much of what we grew up with.
Well, I think some of the foods are not being handed down either.
Right.
My kids do not love gefilte fish. They certainly don't love cha and, you know, head cabbage, head cheese out of bits and pieces of meat that's got jelly in it. I mean, they're all, my parents love that. And I have tasted it myself, or tongue, or speaking Yiddish, or
speaking of tongue,
you know, but some things do get handed down.
but
And
do
I
you
think
that there's a loss to the culture,
do you think, is there a loss to the culture?
or should we just let these go as things of yesteryear that we don't need anymore?
Well, as I was talking, did you think, oh, that's so old fashioned, or, oh, that's kind of interesting?
Well, I thought it was old fashioned because I don't hear it anymore. But I'm not sure. Clearly, I'm somebody who values what's old fashioned. I ended up in this line of work. It interests me, and I hold on to what's valuable. But sometimes I wonder if we don't get mired in superstition. I wonder if sometimes it doesn't debilitate us or stop us from living more full lives, because some people really get stuck in superstition.
Right, like they wouldn't step forward with their left foot first, or, there's some things that are just superstition. But what I have presented, I think, is elevating in a way. It was like, in what way can we help our children over the candles when we bring in those 3 circles and we say, Ribono Shel Olam. Maybe you don't say it in Yiddish anymore, Gott in you. Maybe we say, please protect my children. But it's such a natural human instinct to want to do protection. I see that Stan Blander says, to this day, I use a red ribbon in any car I bought, and other stuff. So some of it has filtered through. And then, of course, there's Madonna, who brought Kabbalah to the forefront. Knocking on wood was not a Jewish origin. It's true, because it was for wood sprites, and it was definitely not Jewish. But what do you knock on? I mean, we I've seen people.
You say wood sprites. I always heard it was touch the cross.
Touch the cross. But I think it went back to that. Yes, but it was
from pagan culture.
From pagan culture. But there is a natural attempt to control, to heal, to promote, to banish, to do something to avoid negative energy.
So the wood was druid, Laura says. That's interesting. I don't know that. I think one of the things you see in religion and culture, as we know, is a lot of borrowing, right? Appropriation. Look at Havdalah. That wasn't originally a Jewish origin. A lot of what we did, the herbs or the candle or the wine, it was Roman. We picked up Greek customs. So we've all taken from the best of each other's religions and experiences. I think that's part of what's enriched a lot of our cultures and our lives.
Well, I would like to add to that something that Ellie Summerfield may remember from her docenting days at the Skirball Museum, and that is adaptation, retention. What did we keep and how did we adapt it to Jewish cultures and boundaries?
What would be an example?
Ketubah. If you look at the ketubot, you can see if it was done in Isfahan in Persia, it has that kind of decoration, or in Italy, or in America, but the text was always the same till very recently. As you said, the Havdalah, but it was made to say goodbye to Shabbat. So something that looked very appealing was say, oh, we could use that for our holidays, for our liturgy, for something that is ours and that is within the Jewish boundary of monotheism and social action and culture and life-enhancing examples.
So, Elise asked a great question. My son's father couldn't make the crib until after my son was born. Is that a superstition?
No, that actually, I mean, I had both my kids in Israel, and we didn't have anything much until the baby was born at home. That's because there was so much infant mortality, and it was a kindness not to fill a nursery with mobiles and clouds and things and all the clothing, and then you don't bring the kid home. So I think in Israel, you certainly don't do baby showers and all that. We never had that. In America, that's gotten a whole lot less. So I don't think it's a superstition. I think it was a reality.
Yeah. Laura asked, could it be said that belief in evil spirits is a form of idol worship and thus forbidden? What's your thought?
Well, it is a fine line, isn't it?
Right.
But if you think that God controls everything, then, you know, uvore et hakol. So what do we do with angels that are tempting? And you have so many stories about that. You say, well, why isn't everything just good? And if God creates everything, then there's got to be room for free choice. And if there's room for free choice, then people can make really bad choices and they can do evil things. And then we can pray to God to deliver us, like the traveler's prayer, deliver us from bandits along the way. I think if you are believing in evil, that's just reality.
Right.
But if you are appealing
Worshiping
to them, worshiping them, that's idol worship. It's a
I think
fine
that makes a
line.
lot of sense. I think it's a matter of how we relate to it. So Sherry, thank you, Sherry. She says Yiddish words have become mainstream, as we know. There was recently a Jeopardy question where the answer was a Yiddish word. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, you hear it in politics. You hear it in all realms of society. People
Losing
use
and
words.
verklempt and yeah.
Absolutely. And in the chat area, I'm asking people to use Q&A, but I can see what you said in the chat. So Jacqueline says, I find these symbols comforting, which it also keeps me connected to my forefathers, which I love as well. It's like the foods. I think all of these visceral experiences, whether it's what we physically do, what we smell, what we taste, the melodies, they connect us to our past and to our family. And somebody called Michael Li-Paz, familiar?
Your daddy. Hi, Michael.
He asks, is God guiding and directing our fate? What's your thought on that, Rabbi?
Michael, that's deep. So Michael is the angel to our right hand. It's God's major angel, and that's who you are. You are a malach. Michael, who is like God. And we both have destiny and free will. Go figure that one out. So is everything planned, or do you have free choice and you can go this way or that way? Yes. I don't know how else to answer.
One and the other, right. And we really live with that balance, which is perhaps there's fate, perhaps God has an intention for us, or there's a reality that will be regardless of what we do. And then we balance that on the other hand, literally, with our free will, that not everything is, well, we would say that our choices matter and therefore we have free will. God needs us to choose.
Yes,
and
we
that's
are
the way I view free will.
Right, we are the choosing people.
Right. Trina asks, I know there's 113, actually 613 commandments. Her late dear husband, Ron, had written down he'd written 113 down in many places, or 613, I think she means. Well, he died at 6:13 a.m. very recently. And Trina, I think a lot of people, especially with the death of a loved one, will see significance in the day in which they died. When somebody dies on their birthday, or dies on Shabbat, or dies on a holy day, or as you see, it would be hard for me to say it's insignificant that Ron died at 6:13, a number that was so clearly important, not only to him as a Jewish man, but to him personally. Clearly that had meaning. And someone anonymously asks a good question. Why do we say tz-tz-tz? And maybe you can answer that. I would just say, remember, there are different versions of that depending on where you grew up. Tz-tz-tz or tf-tf-tf, different ones. And Rabbi Magal, what would you say in terms of why we say that?
We want to channel away negative energy. Now, I'm in Sedona, and a lot of people talk about the vortexes and the energies.
Right.
And if you're sensitive, you do feel energies. And if somebody really can't stand you and they look daggers at you, it can have an effect. I mean, who's to say that voodoo dolls with pins sticking them don't hurt you where they put the pins? I think we're very aware of not drawing down jealousy, envy, or negativity. And that's one way to do it. You sort of push it aside.
Anybody else have questions? Actually, a lot of questions have come in, but please continue. I want to ask you, how do you, I think I appreciate what you're teaching tonight. And I think a lot of times we think about things as being literal, right? What do? I put my hands like this and I say a blessing. I do some strange swimming kind of motion, and because my mother did, and my grandmother did, and my grandmother did, her grandmother did, and I do this kind of strange choreography with my hands, and I light candles and I say a blessing. Or I'll hold a Kiddush cup high in my hand and fill it to the top and say a blessing. And I think sometimes many of us will do these without going to what might be the meaning. How can there be some presence here in this experience that's greater than me? What's your thought from your own experience of Jewish ritual having content that's sacred, not just obligatory ritual?
In the realm of custom handed down to families, whether you do the Passover this way or that way, or whether the afikomen is held for ransom or you automatically give a gift. I mean, these things are, they become imbued with value because your mother, grandmother, whoever, your mentor, your teacher did it that way, how you hold your talit. There is a realm of the cadence of comfort. And so they did, so I will do, feeling this kind of continuity. And sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't know why. And sometimes it's just a very practical reason, you know, the joke about why do you take the roast and cut the two ends and then put it in the pot? Well, my mother did it, my grandmother did it, and went and asked the grandmother, said the pot was too small. So sometimes there's not a really good reason, but it gets imbued with value because it brings up the memory. But other times, it does have something underneath it, like bringing in the light of Shabbat and the candles, and then closing your eyes and having a moment of meditation with the Holy One, so that when you open your eyes, the candles are lit. Well, that was the legal fiction that once you say the blessing, you can't light the candle, so you don't see the candle. And what do you know? The candles are lit. So there was a reason for that, but it became layered with generational meaning, layered with personal meaning. And I think that a lot of our customs are like that. And they may be very different in a Sephardic or Mizrahi home. We think that Ashkenazi rites are normative. They are not. They're often substitutes for the way it used to be. Like the Haroset. It was dates. It wasn't apples. So as I'm studying and learning, and as I learn a lot from my husband who came from Iraq, from Babylon, he's an original Jew from the tribe of Judah, I'm seeing how much we did adapt and change. And some things came because of necessity, and others because of this communal connection. I mean, the Anusim, the hidden Jews in Spain, would light a candle in the cellar or up the chimney. And hundreds of years later, you find people in New Mexico or in South America doing that, and they have no idea why. It turns out that their ancestors were Jews. So we're a little off the thing you asked me, but I think that we all want to be connected and we want to be somewhat in control.
Can
so
I ask
that helps.
I want to ask you another question. What's your view, and I'm asking you as a rabbi, but your personal view about the afterlife? Because I think that ties into the whole idea and world of spirit. What's your understanding at this moment in your life?
I can no longer ignore the signs that I and others have seen, that the soul continues on its journey, that it learns, and that it seems to me it returns, or at least makes signs to us. This is something I did not learn in rabbinical school, but it's coming out more and more as I get older and as I have experience with going to an unveiling and asking people, did you have any sign? And the stories are amazing. So Gilgul HaNefashot, the reincarnation of souls, is something that developed in Judaism, and it wasn't there in the beginning in the early Torah, but it developed through the Middle Ages and through time. And I can no longer ignore it. And I think if you look at the book, Jewish Views of the Afterlife by Simcha Raphael Paul, I always forget. He has a new edition and it is fascinating. And I don't see why we cannot accept that.
Yeah, I feel the same. I've been doing this for 25 years, which means a lot of encounters, 25 years this month, a lot of encounters with death and dying and bereavement. And I, very long ago, a long time ago, gave up the notion that there isn't life after death. I'm no longer in a place where I can believe that based on my experiences with people like you, as you say. So Susan asked a question, what would Orthodox rabbis think about magic, about red strings, etc.? One thing I'd say, Susan, before turning the question to Rabbi Magal is, sometimes we think about Orthodox people as all having the same view, or rabbis all having the same view. So remember that there will be different rabbis of different communities that will have different views. We're not monolithic, even if it's in, more liberal or more Orthodox rabbinate. So Rabbi Magal, what's your thought?
I agree with what you said. And I know that I went once to a rabbi who came to Sedona visiting, and we were just talking, and he said, I feel that you need a kamea. And he gave me this strip of paper with a lot of Hebrew. It was kind of hard to read. And he said, this will give you good luck. I was kind of surprised. So I think there's a huge range of what is considered magic or what's considered good luck in a holy way. Now, listen, when you say to somebody, Mazel tov, you're saying, may it be under a good constellation. The Mazalim are the constellations. Did you realize that? So whether you're talking about Chabad or ultra-Orthodox or different views, they will never say kesem, magic, but they will say this formula, this psalm, if you say it, will help you through this difficult time. As a matter of fact, in the Orthodox prayer book, there is a pasuk, there is a verse that corresponds to your name, your Hebrew name. And I do another workshop where I take your first letter of your name and the last letter of your name, and I find your pasuk. Why do you need that? There's a story that when the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, comes to call, it's called Duma, which sounds like sleeping, right? You'll get all flustered, but if you know your pasuk, that is your name, and that is your like ticket to transition peacefully. Is that a beautiful idea? Yeah. So is that magic? Is that not? And I can tell you that when I looked up mine, Amalia, which is worker of God, it turned out to be Oziv Zimrat Yah by Lehili Lishua and Ze Liva Anvehu. I mean, it was Exodus 15:2, which is part of, which I didn't know, it's part of my rabbinic mission. I had written that years before. And that's my pasuk, that's my phrase. So that's a whole other discussion about how in Orthodox Judaism, there's room for healing and prayers that seem like magic, but it's something we hold on to at times of difficulty and transition and travel and operations. Sure.
One last question, from me at least, and I want to thank everybody. This has been great comments and great questions. Elise, says, my 4 grandparents were all from Belarus. Kainahara, Red Ribbon, Tututu were all from her childhood. I think a lot of us have those memories. So Rabbi Magal, one last question, because I'm aware of the time. And my parrot is probably about to say, either make a sound again or literally just say good night to say he's had enough. So I've got to be respectful of the parrot as well. Now that you and I have shared our shared belief based on experience that there is life beyond death, that we're more than we appear to be, that we're in fact souls, not just bodies, how do you relate to the notion in the Torah that says that we shouldn't consult a medium, that it's very clear you should not essentially engage with spirits? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the author of Torah didn't want that for us?
Because it was too easy to go astray and to look elsewhere for making decisions. If you follow the mitzvot, you'll know what to do because it's right. And you won't find excuses. Well, I saw a black cat or whatever the thing is. You'll say, I need to give tzedakah now, or I need to pray the healing prayer, Misha Berach, for someone. You'll make better decisions based on godly things and not on shtut, not on silly things. So I just want to bring in my mother for a minute. This is my book about her, From Miracle to Miracle, A Story of Survival. And my mother was extremely psychic, and she just knew who to trust, where to go, what choices to make, and it's how she survived. She also knew languages. And I talked about the impact of her incredible dramatic story on my childhood. And it's partly why I became a rabbi. I felt that my life should be devoted to something that is worthy of having so many people die in her family. And she tells me that I am like her mother, whom I never met, and I carry her name, Amalia. So maybe in some way we bring through even those we don't know, because it's important to us to remain connected and to be an ambassador, to be a malach, to be a messenger of good things, of healing things, of protective things, however we find them, to the next generation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're really a gift. And I'm so glad to share this evening and reconnect with you. Hopefully next time, either here at my synagogue, and we'll host you in Yitzchak, or in Sedona. I'd love to come back.
We'd love to have you.
Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck. Mazel tov to everyone here.
And to you, a recent teaching that I read about Mazel was not only the constellation, but the light pouring from that constellation is very specific. So when we're saying Mazel tov, not only may that constellation be with you, but that light, that shefa that's coming into the world, may it guide you and brighten your life.
Amen.
So let me invite Wendy back in with thanks, and maybe Wendy, you can make some closing remarks before we go.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, for sharing your wisdom and insight with us. And it was such a privilege to have you here tonight. Your talk was so interesting and so thought-provoking, and you really gave us so much to think about.
Could we sing Oseh Shalom and all connect? Could you put your hands out and just all connect? I really would like to wish for shalom, wholeness for all of us. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, yimru, amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Amen.
Thank you so much for that. We really learned so much from you tonight. And
Yitzchak.
Shalom aleichem.
Here's the Hobbiton.
Shalom aleichem. Shalom.
47 years.
47 years.
wow.
Yes.
Wow, Mazel tov, in good health.
Thank you.
I would like to invite you all to our next Rabbi in Residence program, which will be on July 15th. We will be having Rabbi Elliot Dorff from American Jewish University, and he'll come to speak to us on contemporary issues in Jewish medical ethics, cloning, stem cell research, biologically engineered foods, and genetic engineering in humans. It should be a very intriguing and enlightening talk, so be sure to join us. Please mark your calendars for the third Thursday of the month for our insightful and inspiring talks. You can find us on our website at vosla.org, and please contact me if you would like to sponsor a rabbi. We look forward to seeing you next month on July 15th. And thank you so much for coming tonight. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Good night.
Thank you, Wendy. Rabbi Magal, toda rabba. Thank you so much.